The War That Saved My Life, Chapter 31. We didn't go to church. We ended up on the floor in front of the fire, wrapped in blankets. Jamie dragged down the stairs, all of us. I don't know how long I screamed and flailed. I don't know how long Susan restrained me. I kicked her and scratched her and probably would have bitten her, but she held on. I don't know what Jamie did other than bring down the blankets. Susan wrapped me in one, rolled me up tight, and the panic started to ease. That's it. That's it, Susan croaked. Shh. Shh. You're okay. I was not okay. I would never be okay, but I was too exhausted to scream anymore. When I woke, the first rays of winter sunlight were coming through the window into the little Christmas tree. The coal embers shone dully beneath the layers of ashes. Jamie slept wrapped in a blanket with Bovril's face peeping out beneath his chin. Susan snored gently. One of her arms was flung up under her ear, and the other still rested across me. Her hair had come out of its bun and was sticking out in all directions. She had a long red furrow down one cheek from where I'd scratched her, and her blouse, her best blouse, had a rip at the shoulder and a button hanging by a thread. She looked like she'd been in a war. I was so completely wound in a gray blanket that I could only move my head. I turned it from side to side, looking first at Jamie, then at Susan, then at the little Christmas tree. Susan would be angry when she woke. She would be furious because I'd screamed about the dress, because I hadn't been grateful, because I'd messed up her plans. We hadn't gone to church because of me. My stomach worked itself into a knot. She would be angry. She wouldn't hit me. She hadn't, at least not so far. She hadn't hit me once the night before, not even when I'd hurt her. She'd wrapped me up and held me tight. I didn't know what to do. Susan was temporary. My foot was permanent. I lay in the weak sunshine and wanted to weep instead of scream, but I almost never cried. What was wrong with me now? Jamie stirred. He opened his eyes and smiled his beautiful smile. All of my life, I would remember the sweetness of that child. "Good morning, Ada," Jamie said. "Merry Christmas." I didn't know what Susan had said or done to Jamie before he fell asleep, but he woke as though sleeping on the living room floor was perfectly ordinary. He sat up, rubbed Bovril's belly, then put the cat outside to do his business and added coal to the fire. The rattle of the coal scuttle woke Susan. I watched her carefully as she opened her eyes and came to an awareness of where she was. She saw me, and she smiled too. Smiled. "Good morning, Ada," she said. "Merry Christmas." I wanted to bury my head in my blankets and weep and scream, but I didn't. Instead, I said, "I can't get up. I can't move my arms." She sat up and untangled me. "I wasn't trying to trap you," she said. "It seemed to soothe you to be bundled like that." "I know," I said. "It did." I pointed to the rip on her blouse. "It's in a seam," she said. "I can fix it." She brushed my loose hair back from my face. "Would you like some breakfast?" We got up and went upstairs and washed our faces and used the loo. At Susan's suggestion, we took off our good clothes and put on our pajamas and dressing gowns. When we came back down the stairs, there was a pile of brightly wrapped packages under the tree. "Presents. Looks like Santa Claus has been here," Susan said. Seemed odd that Santa Claus would stay away all night, but come while we were changing our clothes. I opened my mouth to say so, but saw Jamie's glowing face in time to shut up fast. Jamie's eyes were lit with joy. "He really did come. To us. He did," he said. "Even though Ada was bad." He gave me a quick, guilty look. "It's okay," I said, slipping my arm around his shoulders. "I was bad." I wondered if the presents were all for Jamie. Could any possibly be for me? "Not bad," Susan said. She helped me down the last few steps. "Not bad, Ada. Sad, angry, frightened. Not bad." Sad, angry, frightened were bad. It was not okay to be any of those. I couldn't say so, though, not on that gentle morning. I had the gifts I'd made stuffed into pockets of my dressing gown. I didn't have any paper to wrap them. I wasn't sure what to do. Breakfast, Susan said. She put the kettle on for tea and started a pan full of sizzling sausages. She fried us each an egg. On the table, laid across our plates, were 2 of our stockings, 1 for each. They were stuffed full and knobbly. I poked mine. You should have hung those up last night, she said. But I see Santa found them anyway. Have a look inside while I finish cooking. An orange, a handful of walnuts, boiled sweets, 2 long hair ribbons, 1 green and 1 blue, in the toe a shilling. Jamie had the same, except he had a whistle instead of hair ribbons, and an Indian rubber ball. Shiny, bright girls with ribbons in their hair. I wanted to weep all over again. I wanted to scream. What was wrong with me? I couldn't mess up Jamie's Christmas. I stroked the satin ribbons and went away in my head. I was on butter, up on the hill, galloping, galloping. Ada, Susan touched my shoulder. Come back. Fried sausages on my plate, a fried egg, its yolk as bright as the sun. Toast and strong hot tea. Jamie blew his whistle, a piercing shriek. Save that for outside, Susan said, ruffling his hair. After breakfast, we opened our presents. Jamie got a toy motor car and a set of building blocks. I got a new halter for butter and a pad of paper and a set of colored pencils. We each got a book. Mine was called Alice in Wonderland. Jamie's was Peter Pan. Susan didn't get anything from Santa Claus. She told Jamie grown-ups didn't, but I pulled my gifts from my pocket. For Jamie, I had a scarf made of all the oddments of yarn, different colors and kinds and stripes. He looked at it and frowned. I like the scarf Susan made me better, he said. Susan poked him and said, thank you, which kept me from smacking him. Then I gave Susan her scarf, knit from the white wool. I'd made hers last of all my gifts, so it would be the best, because I really did get better at knitting the more I did it. Susan unfolded it against her knee. Ada, it's beautiful. This is what you've been doing. I got the wool from Fred, I said quickly, so she knew I hadn't stolen it. She hugged me. I love it. I'll wear it every day. I shrugged her away. It was too much, all this emotion. I wanted to get away. She seemed to understand that. Put your jods on and run out to see your pony, she said. Jamie'll help me clear up and we'll get started on dinner. Jamie's 3 pilots came mid-afternoon. They wore their best uniforms and identical polite smiles. They gave Susan a bottle of wine and a box of chocolates and a potted plant. Susan told them she felt like she was getting the gifts of the Magi, and they laughed. The house smelled like roast goose. The fireplace crackled. The sun was setting already, and the living room looked warm and bright, even with the blackouts up. The pilots sat awkwardly on the sofa, all in a row, but then Jamie started cutting up, running his new car over their knees and grinning and acting silly, and pretty soon one of the pilots was on the floor playing with Jamie, making towers with the building blocks and smashing into them with the car, and Susan gave the other 2 pilots glasses of wine, and everyone seemed much more relaxed. I wasn't relaxed. I was wearing the green dress. I'd put it on when I came in from seeing Butter because I knew it would please Susan, and it did. She brushed my hair and let it hang loose, tying my new green ribbon around my head. That's an Alice ribbon, she said. The girl in your book, Alice, she wears her hair like that. I felt like an imposter. It was worse when I tried to talk like Maggie. Here I was, looking like Maggie, looking like a shiny, bright girl with hair ribbons, looking like a girl with a family that loved her. Jamie squeezed my arm. You look nice, he whispered, scanning my face anxiously. I took a deep breath. I did have family that loved me. Jamie loved me. Susan called us to dinner. She'd put Christmas crackers by everyone's plate. I'd never seen them before. They were tubes of paper. When you pulled the ends apart, they made a cracking noise, and paper crowns and little toys fell out of them. We all wore our paper crowns to dinner. The pilots and Susan and Jamie laughed and talked, and I ate goose and tried to keep my insides still. That's a pretty dress, one of the pilots said to me. I felt prickly all over, like my skin was too tight for my body, but I wasn't going to let myself lose control again. Thank you, I said. It's new. It was kind of him to mention my dress instead of my bad foot. I told myself that over and over, and kept still. When they left, Susan sat me on the sofa beside her. "That was hard for you," she said. I nodded. She pulled me against her tight, the way she had the night before, except that I wasn't screaming. "Put the radio on, Jamie," she said. "Ada, let's see your foot." I sighed and arranged myself on the sofa, my bad foot in her lap. She pulled off my stocking and started rubbing and twisting it the way she did every night. We were, she said, making a very small bit of progress. "Where's our book?" Jamie said, and went to fetch it. We were halfway through reading Swiss Family Robinson for the second time. I understood the story better now, but I still didn't like it. The family landed on the perfect island where everything they needed was right in front of them. Susan pointed out that they had to work together to put the good things to use. Jamie just liked the adventures. "Not bad," I said. "Read mine." I made Jamie fetch Alice in Wonderland. Between Alice's hair ribbon and the word Wonderland, I doubted I would like it, but it was better than more Family Robinson. It was better. Alice chased after a rabbit who was wearing clothes and a pocket watch. He went down his hole just like rabbits I saw when I was out on butter. But she went after him and fell into a place she didn't belong, a place where absolutely nothing made sense to her. It was us, I thought, Jamie and me. We had fallen down a rabbit hole, fallen into Susan's house, and nothing made sense. Not at all. Not anymore. Chapter 32. In January, rationing began. It was a way of sharing out what food there was so that the rich people like Susan couldn't go hogging it and leaving poor people to starve. Rationing meant there might not be any butter or meat in the shops, and if there was, you'd better get it in the queue for it fast before it. You better get it in the queue for it. Let me start that over. Rationing meant there might not be any butter or meat in the shops, and if there was, you'd better get it in the queue for it fast before it sold out. We all had ration books that said how much food we were allowed. It made Jamie nervous, me too. Susan had always given us plenty of food, but we knew that was because she was rich, no matter what she said. I'd gotten used to eating regular. We tried eating less. The first time Jamie asked to be excused before he finished his dinner, Susan felt his forehead. "Are you sick?" she asked. He shook his head. "Then eat. I know you can't be full." "I'll save it for tomorrow," he said. I pushed my plate away. "Me too." Susan told us firmly that we were not to save our dinners. She said rationing meant we would have to eat different kinds of foods, more vegetables, less meat, less butter and sweets. It did not mean there would not be enough food. There would always be enough food. She would personally see that we always had enough to eat. "Even if you have to get a job?" I asked her. "Yes," she said firmly, "even if I have to char." Chars were the lowliest kind of cleaning lady. Some of the older girls in our lane back home were chars. "Why?" I asked. She looked at me blank. "Why? You didn't want us. You don't even like us." Jamie held perfectly still. Susan sipped her tea the way she always did when she was stalling. "Of course I like you," she said. "Don't I act as though I like you?" I shrugged. "I never wanted children," she continued, "because you can't have children without being married, and I never wanted to be married. When I shared this home with Becky, that was the happiest I had ever been. I wouldn't have traded that for anything, not even children. I was so sad the day you came, but it wasn't about you. It was just sad. I didn't think I could take good care of you. I didn't think I could take good care of any children." "And you didn't want to," I said, "especially us." Susan said, "Ada, what's this about really? The better you get, the worse you seem." I shrugged again. It was scary how angry I felt inside. At Susan for being temporary, at Ma'am for not caring about us, at Fred for wearing the scarf I had knit him from his wife's wool every day as though it was something special, when I could see myself how I'd dropped some stitches and picked up others so that the scarf was full of holes. At Maggie for loaning me a copy of her Alice Adventures Through the Looking Glass when I told her how much I liked Alice in Wonderland, as though books were something you could just give out like yesterday's newspapers. As though I would be able to sit down and read it as easily as she would. As though the letter I sent her when she went back to school, which took me hours and was full of scratches and misspellings, was anything at all like her letter back to me written in the ink with the Kirby handwriting. At the war for taking us away from Mam before she realized she loved us. At myself for being so glad to go. Ada, Susan spoke slowly and clearly. Right now you are here. I am not sending you or Jamie anywhere. You will both stay here. I will take care of you. You will have enough to eat. You are learning to read and write. And next year you will go to school. We will get your mother's permission. And as soon as we do, you will get the operation to fix your foot. All will be well. Relax. When she started to speak, I almost went away to the place in my head where I didn't feel anything. But Susan tapped my arm, keeping me with her, and she put her hand lightly around my waist while she spoke. I pulled her hand away, but I stayed where I could hear her. That's how I heard the words, an operation to fix your foot. Fix my foot? What on earth did she mean? 3 days later, I rode Butter to the top of the hill. I halted where we could see the sea, dark and violent and thrashing, where the wind whipped Butter's mane against my bad foot, held as it was by the crook of the side saddle. The wind blew the wisps of hair around my face and made tears come to my eyes, and I could feel its coldness even through my warm coat and hat and mittens. No boats anywhere, no signs of spies, new towers built near the beach, and more barbed wire, and what looked like soldiers marching along the ocean's edge. Our soldiers. If it were the Germans invading, the church bells would have rung. I rode slowly down the hill through the village. The butcher standing on his shop door nodded his head to me. One of the women I passed smiled. Another waved. They saw me ride by every day. If they thought I should be kept locked up, at least they didn't say so. They didn't look disgusted by me. At home, I untacked Butter and rubbed him dry. I fed him and combed out his tangled mane. I cleaned the saddle and bridle and put them away neatly. I took my time. Then I went into the house where Susan was and asked, "What does the word operation mean?" Chapter 33. Susan took me back to see Dr. Graham so he could explain. He did not re-examine my foot. We sat in his office, all three of us, and he talked and I listened. First of all, he said, understand that we can't proceed without your mother's permission. At this point, it would have to be considered elective surgery, and that's why we've been waiting for her approval. He glanced up at Susan. You haven't gotten it? Susan shook her head. Well, I have been reading up on the procedure, Dr. Graham said. It would be me who would do the surgery. We'd have to send you to it wouldn't be me who would do the surgery. We'd have to send you to a specialist. I've written to one that I think would be best. He does say that you won't ever have a normal foot. Please understand that. You could have if treatment had started early enough, but you can't now. You won't get a normally functioning ankle, but we could hope for a foot that looked normally positioned, that you could walk on with the plantar surface down. He looked at me and added, that means the bottom. What should be the bottom of your foot would be the part touching the ground. I thought about this. Would it hurt? I asked. You would be sleeping during the surgery, he said. We would give you special medicine to make you stay asleep and you wouldn't feel anything then. Afterward, yes, it would probably hurt. You'd need to stay in hospital for quite a long time, too. Probably several months. Your foot would be kept in plaster casts. Would I be able to wear shoes? His eyes smiled, even though his mouth did not. Yes, he said. When everything was healed, you would. I thought of something else. Who pays for it? I asked. It costs a pile of money to stay in hospital. Susan and the doctor exchanged glances. We'll deal with that problem when we come to it, Dr. Graham said. I'm sure there are charities we could get involved. Susan and I walked home silently through the blustery, freezing wind. What are you thinking? She finally asked. He said if I started treatment early, I could have had a normal foot. Yes, Susan said. Most babies born with club feet have them fixed right away. All the way fixed? Susan put her hand on my shoulder. Yes, all the way. I could have always lived outside the one room? I could have been like Jamie running fast, I said. I thought you kept writing to Mam because you wanted to get rid of us. Susan said, no wonder you were angry. I felt fragile, not the way I had when I exploded on Christmas Eve, but the way I felt the next morning, when the only thing that kept me together was Jamie and Susan's smiles. At home, I sat at the table while Susan put the kettle on. "Do you want to go ride?" she asked. I shook my head. I drank the tea she put in front of me. I pulled my plate over my shoulder and studied the blue ribbon at the end of it. Then I pulled off the slipper shoes Susan had made and pulled off my stocking and looked at my foot, the awkward U-shaped ankle, the tiny toes that curled up not down, the rough calluses where my skin had been torn open and then healed over and over again. Susan said, "It's not your fault." I said, "I always thought it was. I thought I'd done something wrong." "I know," Susan said. "It's disgusting," I said. Susan said, "I never thought so." I searched her face to see if it was a lie. She looked at me steadily. She said, "If you feel very angry, go outside and throw something." I didn't feel angry. I felt sad. So sad I could get lost in the sadness. But when I finished my tea, I got out a paper and pencil and my very best handwriting and wrote a letter. "Dear Mom," it said, "please let them fix me."